Hi, this is Mike Young with Noble Warriors. You're about to hear a message entitled Keys to Financial Freedom. Financial freedom is possible. Presented by Randy Rowekamp. Randy is the state coordinator for Crown Financial Ministries. He lives in Midlothian, Virginia. This workshop was part of the Iron Sharpens Iron Men's Conference hosted by Noble Warriors at West End Assembly of God in Richmond, Virginia on Saturday, March 22, 2014. I pray the message will challenge and encourage you as you walk with Christ and lead your family.
All right, we'll get started. It's a few minutes to 2, but I know they were asking people to get into the room, so I always like to honor the people that are on time, so we'll get started. My name's Randy Rowekamp. I'm a regional representative with Crown, and we're going to be talking about this issue of financial freedom. And where I like to start is talking about how many keys are there. So the title is called The Keys to Financial Freedom. Well, just how many keys are there? Well, there's a lot of biblical keys. There's over 2,350 verses in the Bible that deal with money and possessions. And unlike man's economy and man's thinking, these are keys that will bring about true happiness. Unlike the man, there was an elderly gentleman. He was kind of a hoarder and a greedy guy and not very nice. And so he went to his wife and said, listen, when I die, I want you to put all my money in the coffin with me. And so she agreed, and so the day came, he passed away. They're at the service. She brings her girlfriend to the service, and just as the undertaker gets ready to close the casket, the widow takes this little box and puts it in the coffin. And the friend of the widow looks at her and says, you didn't really put all that money in there. She said, well, I promised him that I would. So what I did is I took all the money, I put it in my checking account, and I wrote him a check. He says, if he can cash it, he can spend it. So she honored her word, right? Now that's an example out of man's economy. That's the one about, who dies with the most toys wins, right? That appeals to men a lot. But what the Bible says in Matthew 6:19, it says, do not store up treasure for yourself here on the earth, right? Where moth and rust destroy and thieves come in and steal. And that kind of philosophy, every day that I'm getting closer to dying, I'm getting further and further away from that money. Whereas if I'm putting that treasure in heaven, then I'm getting closer. So we're not going to talk about that kind of key today, but we will talk about, I want to start with kind of defining what we mean in Crown about financial freedom. So financial freedom is a freedom from something, it's a freedom to something. So it's a freedom from bondage of debt, the oppression of others, envy, greed, resentfulness. And that's why I say it has nothing to do with how much money you have. You can have a lot of money and still be greedy. But it's the freedom to respond without hesitation to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. And that's where we want to be, in short, to fulfill the purpose for which God has someone here on earth. And so I want to unpack that a little bit in terms of some scripture, because everything that we do in Crown is biblically based. And so the first, bondage of debts, oppression of others, out of Proverbs 22:7, it says, just as the rich rule over the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. And so we find out debt is modern age bondage, it's modern age slavery, however you want to call it. And it affects every culture, every race, every nation. It's rampant. And if you think that it's not oppression, then just don't make some payments. Don't send in some payments for some of the bills that you owe, and pretty soon you will find out about oppression, because you're going to have the creditor call you, and then at some point they're going to turn it over to someone else, and it's going to go up. So it is oppression, and it's not what God desires for us, because it hinders us from doing what He wants us to do. We talk about envy. Envy is covetousness, and in the 10 Commandments, there's 2 commandments that talk about that. So we don't want to be covetous, I can't say that word, but you know what I mean, about our neighbor or anything like that. So we don't, envy can be a big problem to keep us from being financially free. Greed is about the love of money. In Timothy, it talks about the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. And so, we can be greedy with a little. You can see little kids do that. They get a little bit of something, and a brother or a friend or sister wants something they have. Nope, they're greedy, they're not giving it away. So it affects all ages. And then resentfulness is that thing where we can get angry, we can get bitter because somebody else got something that we didn't. Could be somebody at work that got a raise and we thought we should have. If somebody at work got a promotion, we think we should have. Maybe a neighbor comes home with, a newer car than we have. So then we start to get resentful because we don't have it. So those are the kinds of things. There's a lot the Bible has to say about all these topics. And what's interesting is like even with greed, we don't hear this much in church. And are there any pastors in here? Okay. And so this is nothing against pastors because, I've learned that a lot of what we're talking about isn't taught in seminary. A lot about giving is taught in seminary, but a lot about stewardship is not. But greed is just as offensive to God as adultery is, as murder is, as stealing. There are scriptures just about greed, how offensive it is to God. So these are things that tie people up, and it keeps us from serving God. Now, the freedom to respond without hesitation to the Holy Spirit, that's the prompting of the Holy Spirit. And so, I'm not trying to tell you need to be in ministry at all. The freedom to respond could be the freedom to continue doing what you're doing in life. If that's what you feel God's called you into, you're happy doing that, be blessed. That's great, because that's where God probably wants you, right? So I'm not saying, all this is about freedom to join a ministry. It's freedom to be able to operate in what you're doing. And, maybe at some point, financial freedom to you means, okay, God, you've provided for everything I'm going to need. I don't need any more to retire or to live till I die. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep 10%. I'm going to give you 90. Think about that. Just switch the table and give more to God. So that's an option too with financial freedom. And I guess the example that I would use, we have a book called The SALT Plan. I have it down at the table. It's an acronym for savings, asset allocation, liquidity, and truth. And liquidity is what I call the freedom to respond. Abram is a perfect example of this. He was living in the land with his father. He had land, he had crops, he had fields, he had children, he had slaves or servants, and all of a sudden God called him, and he left, right? We know that story. So he's a good example of what I'm talking about. So it's that ability that if God calls you, you're financially free. You're not going like, well, gee, if I didn't have all this debt and if I didn't have this or that, then I could do it. It's the freedom to be able to do what God asks you to do. And then in short, to fulfill the purpose for which God has us here on earth. And what I've learned, I didn't know all this when I first started with Crown. I've learned a lot and it's been good. But we know that God has a purpose and a plan for us. And we've all heard the verses about how God made us uniquely. What I had never tied together was the fact that God's a God of order. He designed me exactly for the plan and purpose that he has for me. And I had never put that together, but it's true. And so what we want to do is we want to find that purpose, but we also want to understand our design, because that's when we're going to be the happiest, we're going to be the most creative, we're going to be the most passionate, God's going to get the glory, he's going to do a lot of things through us. So this is all kinds of topics we talk about in Crown and about financial freedom. So here are some of the keys. And one is to live a life of biblical stewardship. And I'm going to unpack that for you and show you what that life looks like. It's really a mindset, and it's all biblically based, and I'll show you those Bible verses. But then effectively manage what God has provided, because God has given us everything. Everything that we have is from God. So our time, our talent, our treasure. And at some point, I like to say that every decision we make is a stewardship decision. Now, I'm not a one-dimensional person, okay, but if I want to get into a one dimension for a second, we can talk about this. So just as Mike asked this morning, did anybody have anything else they could have been doing today, right? So we made a decision about our time to be here. And the talent, okay, everyone came here today because they wanted to get sharpened, right? Iron sharpens iron, so people came for different reasons. They saw what was going to be talked about, so they came to really improve their talent. And then treasure, I assume most of you either personally paid to be here or someone else paid for you to be here, so it took our treasure. So at some level, everything is a stewardship decision, and that's why I'm talking about a mindset. Because at some point we want to run those decisions past that stewardship model and mindset. And the other thing that God's shown me is about relationships. And if you really believe that God is in control, then you have to believe that the people that He's put in your life, He put there. Or the people in your life, He put there. They aren't accidents. And so he actually, it was a couple years ago, as I was reading the Bible one morning, he showed me this, and so I've done some more research, and I really believe this. And so when people come into my life that, not just an acquaintance or, like you guys, we're together for right now, so I'm not going to that extreme, but people that are in my life, people in my church, my family, friends, people I used to work with, people now that I work with Crown, we're together for a reason. So I ask God, am I in this relationship to help that other person? Or am I in this relationship because they're going to help me? Or are we in this relationship together because we're going to do something together? And so relationships are important to God. God is a relational God, right? I mean, we're all about sanctification. We're all about trying to become more like Jesus Christ and develop that relationship. So relationships are important to God, and they will cost you. They will take your time. They will take your talent. They will take some treasure. They may take sacrifice, especially with our children. Sometimes we sacrifice a lot for our children, and so relationships are important to God. So these are the major high-level keys, I guess you want to call them. And then going down one level from that is that we start, and these are like precepts that Crown talks about. And do you have here's an outline of all these slides. So, does everybody have that? There's some extra ones up here. Some people I had to give just a single piece of paper. You need two more back there? There's some up here. Oh, have you got them now? Oh, you're good? Okay. So again, at a high level, this is what we in Crown teach, is lordship, stewardship, and generosity. And if you don't get the lordship thing, the rest of it gets very difficult. And the lordship is what we're talking about, is that God owns everything. And He provides everything. In the Bible, it says that He's never turned over possession of the land. He's never turned any of this over to people. He owns it all. And so we think about that sometimes in our head, but we've got to get that into our heart. So we need to study the Bible to see, what does that mean? Let's unpack that lordship issue. So, and of course, lordship applies, to our salvation, a lot of other things. So again, I'm not a one-dimensional person, but I want to focus on this area today. So we have to get to that purpose. And a steward is someone who manages somebody else's property, right? So the who of stewardship is God, because everything is His. Then we need to be good stewards. And the Bible is very specific about some responsibilities for stewards. And we're going to talk about some of those in like the next slide or two. So that's what when we all think about appearing before Jesus Christ in heaven, and we all want to hear that well done, right? So what I want to talk about today is, again, some of the things that you can do now that will help you ensure that you're going to hear that when you meet Him. And two big elements that we talk about in Crown are self-control and contentment. And self-control is that thing about, not always needing too much, or not always needing it right now, that kind of thing. And so self-control is learned. And so I try to really, I guess maybe put this in context in terms of needs, wants, and desires. So the Bible says that God will meet all of our needs. He promises that. He doesn't promise that He'll meet all of our wants. He doesn't promise that He'll meet all of our desires. But we serve a gracious God, and He sometimes does that. So the way I think about that in terms of needs, wants, and desires, did you all watch the Super Bowl? Anybody in here watch the Super Bowl? Mm-hmm. Was there one commercial? There you go.
Go Seahawks.
Go Seahawks, Pastor. You're glad I brought this up, right? There was one commercial on there that a lot of those commercials strike you, but there was one that really seemed strange to me. And I don't know if you remember seeing it. It's one about the Maserati. You remember that? And I thought, at first I was like, what in the world are they advertising and spending that's expensive advertising. What are they doing on Super Bowl? This is for, everybody and his brothers watching this, people around the world are watching this. These people aren't in the market for Maseratis. What are they doing? And I still don't know. I never did get it. I didn't ask them, but to me, that's a desire, right? If I have a need for transportation, I had to get here today, you had to get here today, that's the need. That, to get here in a Maserati, that would be a desire, right? You'd get here fast. You might get a ticket, I don't know, but you'd get here. And then a desire might be, well, I'm gonna buy a new car, okay? And I'm not against new cars. Okay, if they're in your budget and you budgeted for them and you plan for them, that's fine. Okay, but a new car might be a desire. Whereas the way I and my wife think about this is in the terms of a need, we think in terms of used cars. The last new car I bought was in 2002. It was a Honda Odyssey. I'm still driving it. But all our other cars have been used. And what I talk about is looking for a car, 2.5, 4.5 years old, one owner, low mileage. That's the sweet spot. We all know you drive a new car off the lot, and if you drove it right back in and traded it in, you'd lose a lot of money, right? So we know that depreciation curves like that, but the value of the car is building over time, right? It's getting more and more important. It's not costing us as much money to maintain. So that's the sweet spot. And so we'll talk about that again later, but that's what I'm talking about in terms of needs, wants, and desires. Contentment is learned. Paul says that in Philippians 4:13. He said, I've learned to be content in whatever circumstance I'm in. Right? He knew how to get along with little. He knew how to get along with a lot. And that's actually, that's actually a money verse about I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But the word is multifaceted, so it applies to a lot of other things that Christ gives us strength for. But in the context, it's actually a money verse. But we have to learn to be content. And I always am cautious to say, I'm not talking about being complacent. Okay, there's a big difference between contentment and complacency. So again, I'm not sitting here waiting for God to drop something out of heaven. That's being complacent. Whereas what I'm going to do, I'm going to get out, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to use my talents, my abilities, my resources to do well. And then if God chooses to bless me, He will. But I can be content at whatever level of income I'm at. And that's another thing. God is desiring to do extraordinary things with ordinary people who have ordinary finances. We don't need to be rich to further the kingdom, right? I mean, we can further the kingdom at any level of income. It's God chooses who He's going to give more to, right? So, and then we teach generosity. And we think that people need to become, over time, more generous to God and to their fellow man, right? And that's what Jesus asks us to do. So we want to make sure that we're honoring Him, that we're promoting the kingdom, and then when we see people that we come into contact again with relations, that we're generous if they need help. Because He blesses us to bless others, right? We all know that. So this is the mindset that I wanted to talk to you about the financial habits and practices of a steward. Now I'm going to go through these. Crown has 2 studies. I have one of them. I have them both downstairs at my table if you want to see these. They're designed to be administered by the local church. You don't need me or someone from Crown to come in and do it. I can help train up your leaders, but we have 2 studies that deal with all these issues here from a biblical point of view, so people learn the biblical principles, and then we teach the practical part as well. So we want to earn diligently. So if you're an employee, you want to be honest, you want to be on time, you want to respect your boss or your company. You want to use your talent. If you're a business owner, and that's the way you earn your money, you want to treat your customers right, you want to treat your employees right? So we want to earn diligently. We want to plan to use all that we earn. So I didn't say spend. I said we want to plan to use it all, and that requires that we have a plan. We're going to talk about that in a couple slides. We want to spend smartly. That means that we have a plan and we spend according to the plan. We don't just say, there's X number of dollars in my checkbook, so I can go do whatever I want till the checkbook gets to 0, right? I'm going to spend according to that plan. We want to avoid the bondage of debt. So again, if we have a plan, we can plan, if we're in debt, we can plan put a plan together that will get us out of debt and keep us out of debt. Now, again, I know that may sound Pollyannic to you, but life happens, right? I mean, things can happen. You can be on an even keel and all of a sudden, boom. So I'm not denying that, but I'm just saying under normal circumstances, you will be able to get yourself out of debt and stay out of debt. Then we want to save wisely, and we'll talk about that. A friend of mine asked me one time, well, how do I learn how to save? I said, well, set goals. Set short-term goals and long-term goals. Sit down. If you're married, sit down with your spouse. If you're not married, sit down with a friend, or think about yourself and then review with a friend or a pastor or somebody. But if you start setting short-term goals and long-term goals, it's going to motivate you to save money instead of being tempted. Again, get out of self-control for a while, and we're getting into spring. Maybe you need a new set of golf clubs, maybe you need some fishing equipment, maybe you need a bass boat, who knows, I don't know what you might need. But it keeps us, if we have goals, if that's one of them, that's great. Again, we are not, we're not poverty gospel ministry. We believe that if you have a plan and you've set the goals, and they're godly goals, then you should go ahead and get them. But, so there's the things will come up, and we just need to be able to resist those. And so then investing patiently, that again develops the mind. You need to develop a mindset. You need education. You need some tools. You may need a financial planner, I don't know. But we want to learn how to invest patiently. Then we want to protect those assets adequately. And then at the same time, we want to give generously. So as we're getting out of debt, another thing we teach in Crown is you're getting out of debt, keep giving. Don't stop giving so you can get out of debt faster. We need to keep those in balance. And so let me unpack these things just a little bit more. Let me go back to that. So like in the earn diligently, I told you these were all biblical. In Colossians 3, 23, and 24, it says, to whatever you do, do your work heartily as unto God rather than men, for it's the Lord Christ whom you serve. Right? So these are biblical principles. These aren't just good ideas. And sometimes you'll see people in the world with teaching secular things, and they'll use these principles. So they're good principles, but then sometimes they start putting a spin on them that maybe gets people in trouble. So what we're trying to teach here is to continue to have that biblical mindset of how to deal with money. It's like I said in the main room there. If we understand the biblical concepts, then we're going to make better decisions. So let's go on here. So then, in summarizing this part, the stewardship then, and this is really taking the idea of stewardship higher. Stewardship then, in the end, isn't about what we do. It's ultimately about God and who He is and who He desires us to become. And this comes from the Stewardship Study Bible. I didn't bring that up here. That's going to be one of the giveaways in the main room when Mike does the giveaways. So make sure you got your name filled out on those cards he pulls from, because that's going to be one of the things given away. It's a really great resource. So, and the reason I talk about this, and again, Pastor, forgive me, but sometimes, and my pastor is like this. I mean, they don't talk about stewardship the way I just did, and I've learned in churches that a lot of times, as soon as the pastor says the word stewardship, people start grabbing for their wallets, their purses, whatever, right? Because the pastor's going to ask us for money. It's like where I used to work. Every time a vice president came in and started talking to us about productivity, we knew what that meant. That was code for head count, head count cuts and budget cuts. That's what productivity was. So it's kind of code word. And what we're trying to do is help expand that. And that's why we're a tool for churches to help the pastor do that, is to teach people more about these principles, because what happens then is the people become financially free in the church. Guess what happens to the church? And then the church starts to be able to do more about its vision and mission, right? So it grows over time. So now I'm going to start talking about some practical things here that can help you. But just to start that off, there's over 2,350 verses in the Bible that deal with money and possessions. The interesting thing I've learned about that is about 80% of those deal with attitude, philosophy about money and possessions. Some of them are, definitely about the actual money and possessions you can put your hands on, but a lot of it is attitudinal. And what we've learned in Crown is that we have to help people understand these principles, because that's the only thing that's going to change their heart. The Bible, the Holy Spirit's the only thing that's going to change people's heart. So we want to teach them that, and so that's why the Bible's so important, being in the Bible, studying these things, so we know how to be a good steward. Nearly half of Jesus' parables were about money and possessions, and he spoke more about money and possessions than heaven and hell combined. And so what I always say here is, the truth will set us free, but first we have to know it, right? So we have to know what these principles are so they can set us free. Here's some other facts now about money. Money and work are two of the most common causes of stress among Americans. 75% of people said money was their biggest stressor. And we hear about that all the time in families, right? We hear about how people come together and they either don't talk about money or they argue about money. And it's easy to understand what happens. Like, for example, my wife and myself, she came from a family of 10. Her father owned a real estate business, and he was like the master of budgeting. I mean, he really had a good control over it. Of the 10 children, there were a few that picked up on that. My wife was one of them. So she came into our marriage with a pretty good understanding of what you need to do to manage money. Me, on the other hand, I wasn't a spender, but on the other hand, my parents didn't tell me anything about money. They really didn't teach me anything. I didn't know about what they did, how they managed their money. All I knew is that we were kind of middle class. We weren't extravagant. We weren't needy, but I didn't get it. It wasn't like they were giving me things left and right. But one thing my mother always did is whenever I had to, like if I had to buy a winter coat, she'd buy a coat nice that would last me several years, right? Instead of get a new coat every year. So I kind of came in with that mindset of when you need to buy something that's going to be long term, try to get something decent. But that we came in that way. And then we've kind of gone, we're pretty much in the middle now. I've learned a lot from her. We both learned a lot from studying stewardship now and things like that. So, but people come into marriages, you can have a spender and a hoarder. Think what happens then, right? That's a formula for some arguing, right? So what we teach people in Crown is sit down together and set goals together. And then when it comes time to spend money, map that to your goal. And if it's something you two agreed with, fine, do it. If it isn't going to map to our goal, then either A, we sit down and change our goal, or B, we agree not to do it. But now we're working off the same page, and that's really important. More than half of U.S. adults, 56%, admit that they don't have a budget. So I'm going to assume that's true in this room. The 56% of you don't have a budget, and the 44% do. So hopefully I'll help both groups. If you don't have a budget, you'll learn some things maybe you didn't know. If you have one, maybe you'll learn some other things that you didn't know. A third of adults say they don't pay their bills on time. That's not good. That leads us back to that bondage of debt. It leads us back to that oppression. It can affect what we pay interest rates, for things that we buy. I know somebody who applied for a job, had a terrible credit score, and got turned down because of the credit score. Right? If you rent and you go into rent and the people are doing credit checks and background checks, they may not rent to you if you're a poor credit risk, because they know pretty soon they're going to have to kick you out, and they know that's going to cost them a lot of money. So these credit scores are very important. I think you know that. So now I want to compare two patterns here and show you how what man's economy, what the secular world will teach you about money, and then compare that to God. So here we have the circle going this way, and when I put the other circle up, it's going to be going the other way. It doesn't matter which way they're going, they're just opposite. Okay? Here, in the world's pattern, first thing that happens is people say, well, I acquired it. Look what I did. It's because of me I've got this money. And so the first thing they do is they think about how can we use that for our enjoyment. And then they say, well, we need to have some money to repay others. we ought to be saving some of this, don't you think? Oh yeah, Sunday's coming up. We need to think about giving some of that money. And then, let's spend a few minutes planning, maybe a vacation or what we're going to buy next, or who knows what they're planning. But this circle just keeps going that way. And I like to compare that to God's pattern. And you'll notice here that these words here, plan, give, save, they're exactly the same, right? The circle's now going the other way, and the big difference there is dedicate. So when we're believing that God's providing everything, when we receive that paycheck or we receive payments, if we own a business, we're receiving payments, we're dedicating that to God. Thank you, Lord, for providing. And so it's yours anyway. I'm dedicating this to you. So now the first thing we do is plan. We talk about you have a budget. You take that money, you allocate it to your categories in your budget. Included in that budget is giving. So first we pay taxes, right? And then we pay our tithe. And then we pay ourselves. We save. So now we have in our budget, we're going to save so much money a month, right? So we put that in there. Then we repay our bills if we still have bills to pay. And then we enjoy the money because now we have a plan. And this is the beautiful thing about a budget. When you have money, a lot of people think budgets are constraining. They hate them. They think, I don't want something dictating anything to me. The fact of the matter is, if you have a budget and you have a certain amount of money in a category, let's say clothing or going out to eat, well, guess what? Go out to eat all you want. Don't overspend that category. But don't worry about not having enough money at the end of the month if you stay within that amount. It's very freeing. You don't, and one thing I especially like talking to guys about this, if you were going to go on vacation and you all got ready, you got every car loaded up, you're getting ready to leave, and you pull out the driveway, and you look down on your dashboard and your gas gauge is broken. How would that make you feel? Right? I mean, you'd be, every 100 miles, 200 miles, you'd be pulling in a gas station. Keep that thing full because you wouldn't know when you're going to be on the road and it's going to go out. Well, if you don't have a budget, it's the same way. You don't know when during the month you're going to run out of money. That's why you need a budget. Because guess what happens? If you run out of money, what's going to happen? Out come the credit cards, right? Here they come. Now we're going back into debt. So we got to have a budget. They're very, very helpful. So here's the whole point of this, is Romans 12:2. Someone just mentioned it during one of those sessions down there. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Most of us grew up in this pattern right here. I did. That's the pattern I had. When I go back before they had direct deposits and all that stuff. So on payday, friends of mine, we'd all take our check, we'd go to our banks, and we'd all go get pizza. So there we were. We acquired some money. We're out getting a little pizza. So anyway, this is the way we grew up. This is where we want to be, though, and that's going to take transforming. That's going to come through God's Word when we study these things. So here's 4 biblical principles of money management. Spend less than you earn. There's one. That's from Proverbs 21:20. It says, the wise man saves for the future, but a foolish man spends whatever he gets. So we want to be wise. We want to save for the future. So you spend less than you earn. That's just a cardinal rule. That was one of the things my wife and I always did. And I do want to say, I'm not here because everything worked perfectly for us. We had situations with we have 5 children. We've been married 42 years. We had 2 children that got into drugs. One of them had to go to a rehabilitation. It's a residential treatment. That's what it was. This is back in the early 90s. Those things then were $100 a day to have him in that. They had him down in the Dominican Republic. And that's over $30,000 a year. And God was able, my wife and I will tell you, we don't know how this happened, but we didn't have to go into debt. God somehow provided. We tightened our belt as tight as we could get it. She was a stay-at-home mom, with our other children. She started going to yard sales and buying things that she knew were really underpriced. A lot of people put things in yard sales, they have no clue. And so, but she does, and she'd buy them cheap, and she'd put them in, we had a place, now you have Craigslist, then we didn't have that. We had a place we could advertise them in. She might make 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times what she paid for it. She started doing that, and and then she took a couple kids in the morning and afternoon after school. Somehow God got us through that. So I'm not standing up here like, with this golden spoon in my mouth. I mean, we went through it. And that's why I'm here. I want to encourage you guys. You can do this. You can be out of debt. You can be financially free. And you can have this financial freedom. How many in here are out of debt? Okay. See? There's other ones. See, it can be done. And then the other thing about learning these principles, my wife and I were teaching the 10-week study that we have, and we were helping another church get started in it. And anyway, so this one couple was in there, and week 3 is about debt. And the man came into that class that night, and he said, Randy, I want to tell you something. He said, we have been out of debt 3 times. He said, this time we're staying out of debt. Because you got it.
That's the better question. How many times have you been in and out of debt?
That's right.
Because sometimes you're going through that cycle.
Yes.
But if you're grounded with the foundation and fundamentals, then you've got something to recalibrate yourself.
Yeah. And see, he never had that. But now he did. So he knew what to do. So anyway, so I really, really want to encourage you. I mean, that's why I do what I do. I used to work at Philip Morris. I was there 30 years. I retired. I got into this ministry. I retired in May. I started in August. It was 6.5 years. And the reason I do this, the reason it gets me up in the morning, is so that I can help people get financially free so they can do what God wants them to do. That's it for me. That's what I love doing. That's what makes my eyes light up, And I love to see the lights in other people's eyes light up when they learn this stuff. And it happens. It's really awesome. Avoid the use of debt. We've talked about that. Now, the Bible doesn't say debt is a sin, but it can be a curse, right? It does talk about that in Deuteronomy 28. So you want to avoid the use of debt as much as possible. And there's, most people can't buy a home for cash. Okay, so there are some times when debt's okay. If you're buying an asset that's supposed to appreciate, now we know that didn't, 10 years ago you could have said that and probably would have been, everybody going, yeah. You say that now, they look at you, where you been, But things that appreciate, debt's okay. Build an emergency fund. If you have an emergency fund, then probably 90 or 95% of the things that can come up in a month that aren't in your budget, you'll be able to cover with that emergency fund. We're going to talk about that in a slide or so. So you want to have an emergency fund and then set long-term goals. So this avoid the use of debt is from Proverbs 22:7. Building an emergency fund is Proverbs 6:6-8 about the ant. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider ways and be wise. Right? They store up in the summer so that during the winter they'll have something. So we want to build an emergency fund and set long-term goals. Proverbs 6:6-8. And then set long-term goals. In Philippians 3:14, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Jesus Christ. So setting long-term goals for sending your children to college, for getting out of debt. You may be starting a business, different things. You want to have long-term goals. And I think I'm going to have time to do this. So I want to show you, this is humorous. I want to kind of beat this point of staying out of debt. Oh, it's not very loud, is it? Can you hear that?
The other one. That's the tune.
Okay. Well, I'll just skip. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, the volume on the laptop is down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Let me see that. If you don't have any money, you should not buy anything. Sounds interesting.
Sounds confusing.
I don't know, honey. This makes a lot of sense. There's a whole section section here on how to buy expensive things using money you save.
Give me that. And where would you get this saved money? I'll tell you where and how in Chapter 3.
Okay, well, what if I want something but I don't have any money?
You don't buy it. Well, let's say I don't have enough money to buy something. Should I buy it anyway? No. Now I'm really confused. It's a little confusing at first.
Well, what if you have the money? Can you buy something?
Yes.
Now take the money away. Same story?
Nope. You shouldn't buy stuff when you don't have the money. I think I got it. I buy something I want and then hope that I can pay for it, right? No. You make sure you have money, then you buy it. Oh, then you buy it. But shouldn't you buy it before you have the money? No.
Why not?
It's in the book. It's only 1 page long. The advice is priceless and the book is free.
Wow, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, we can put it on our credit card. So get out of that now. Write for your free copy of Don't Buy Stuff You Cannot Afford. And if you order now, you'll also receive Seriously. If you don't have the money, don't buy it. Along with a 12-month subscription to Stop Buying Stuff magazine. So order today.
How much is that going to cost?
Yeah. And I know Saturday Night Live might not be politically correct in this group, but it is funny. They do make a point. So, so let's talk about this process. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about a budget, having a budget. I'm not going to teach you how to develop one. We have a resource downstairs at my table called Creating a Spending Plan. It's a 90-minute video. It'll take you through step by step by step. So I'm not going to do that here. But first you want to build an emergency fund. We talked about that, of $1,000. That's what you should shoot for. Some people say, well, I can't do that. I don't really have, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Well, it may take some drastic measures for a short period of time. So you know, and that's the other thing I want to tell you. I know this is hard, right? I know this is hard. This isn't as easy as it sounds, and when I'm not trying to paint a picture that it's easy. It's going to take work, it's going to take sacrifice, take that commitment if you're married to make this happen, but it can be done because other people have done it. So first thing you want to do is you may have to cancel the cable. You may have to sell some stuff that you don't use anymore, or maybe you're paying something on, you know, I had a friend that had a boat and he kept paying, you know, stuff for it and he never used it. So he finally went, oh yeah, I should sell that and get rid of that. You know, that can help. Sir, did you, go ahead.
Oh, well, we have cable, 3 TVs, and I decided one day to take it off one of the TVs and take the box back. And my wife just went crazy. But then after about a week, she said, you know, this is okay. We'll leave it the way it is.
Cool.
So, I mean, you know, there is a
Yeah.
light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, again, think about it as temporary, you know. This isn't a permanent lifestyle change. You know, this is something you're going to have to do for a short period of time. And even thinking about getting out of debt, most people with the average amount of debt in the United States per family, you can think 4, 5, 6 years you might be out of debt, but somewhere under 10, you'll be out of debt. That can be done. So again, it's not going to be boom, you know, next month, next year, but it's you can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Let's talk about that. You begin logging your spending in a 30-day diary. So you keep track of everything you spend, and every couple days you put it in. You can put it in Excel. Crown has a form you can put it on. There's Mint.com. There's a lot of places where you can put this information. What I say is, do what you can, you know, what you like doing. I'm not interested in how you do it. I'm interested that you do it. You know, so, and how many times a day do you think you spend money?
More on the weekend.
What?
More
on the weekend, right? In general, it's only 2 or 3 times a day where you're spending money. So, you know, if you do every 3 or 4 days, you do this, you're putting 10 entries in some form or somewhere, right? And then there's things that you know, maybe you have your house payment taken out of your checking account anyway. So, you know, you're going to put those things on the estimated spending plan. There are forms on the Crown website. You go to crown.org. There's forms that are downloadable. They're PDFs. They're free. We have calculators out there. They're free. There's a lot of tools there. There's other websites you can go to as well. Again, whatever you want to use is fine. Whatever's going to help you, use it. The estimated spending plan's probably got 16 to 18 categories in it. So, like food, clothing, automobile, saving, child care, there's a whole bunch of them. So you're going to take what you're spending every day and you're going to put it in one of those categories on the 30-day form. And at the end of the month, you're going to add it all up. And right now, if you did this estimated spending plan, you'd probably be 60 or 70% right, but you won't be exactly right. After you do that 30-day diary, you'll probably be up to 90 or 95%, but you may have forgotten, oh, we pay this quarterly, or we pay this every 6 months, or once a year, or whatever, or you forget something altogether that you're paying on. And so we were helping a couple, I don't know why I'm doing this, I don't know, but we had a couple we were helping one-on-one, and we'd been meeting several times. We thought we finally had all their spending on their forms, and we were talking about things, trying to help them and make suggestions. And one day they mentioned some hospital bills they had. And my wife and I looked at each other and were like, well, you didn't tell us about those. They said, well, we don't pay them anyway, so we don't consider it part of our budget. Okay. If you're married, work together. Again, sit down, work together, like you, sir. You sit down with your wife, say, hey, we're going to get rid of the cable. Let's try it, And then after 30 days, you'll be able to take that 30-day diary, what you came up with first time, and you're getting closer. And I recommend you do this for about 3 months straight, because then you're going to start to get a pretty good feel for where your money's going. And then what we recommend is there's probably a couple areas of your budget that are going to be troublesome. I mean, most people have that. So after that, after say 30 days and you're going like, yeah, this feels pretty normal. We're kind of in this range. And pay really close attention to the things that are causing you trouble. Your house payment's your house payment, right? So, okay. But food, entertainment, clothing, things maybe some parents like to buy a lot of stuff for their kids if that's something that's causing a lot of money. Some people have hobbies. They spend a lot of money on that. Those are the things you pay attention to and start to develop this mindset and get them under control.
Randy?
Yes, sir.
I think that fourth burger dot there around
this one?
If you're married, working together, that's so I think most of us understand, those that are married, that finances is a devastator to marriages. And work that looks very simple to do, but if you're in a situation where things are really bad, and so for example you come and you hear something like this, intellectually it makes a lot of sense, but it's challenging. And so sometimes with the information you have to try to make it better, you may be there, but the other person may not, or vice versa. So it may take some time to get to a point where you work together, but it's paramount. It's very important that you two get to that point, and you do it baby step at a time. Right, very good point. And we had another example from another couple we were helping one-on-one. We told them to do that. Sit down, talk about goals together. Short-term, long-term goals. They said fine. So the next time we came back to meet with them, I asked him how that went, and he said, well, we really didn't do it. And at first my heart kind of sank, and then he said, but then what he said was really important, and it's what you talked about. He said, we sat down to do it, and we decided we didn't even know how to have that conversation. They'd never had that kind of conversation before. They agreed to go think about it independently and then come back together. So you're right, it can take a while. And plus both people have to be agreeable. There has to be something in it for both of them. So again, this is not easy, but it works. If you work it and you do it biblically, it'll work for you. Here's some interesting facts about debt. Average credit card debt in the United States is $15,700. Household debt, now, so this includes people that rent. So if you have a mortgage, your number may be higher, but average household debt $70,000.
Percentage of families whose debt exceeds 40% of their income is about 15%. I can tell you here right now that is not sustainable. You cannot be servicing 40% of your income on debt and eat and pay the bills and live. You can't do it. You're headed for that's a train wreck. 15% of the people in the United States are in that boat. Student debt compounded by enrollments is growing 3,000 seconds. Student debt in the United States is $1 trillion. You know, we hear the numbers about the federal government and other places. Student debt is $1 trillion, and I'll answer you in a second. The point about that, and I read this a couple weeks ago, it's going to have an effect on our economy in terms of the housing market, because you think about people that graduate from college, a few years after college, you know, now people are getting married older, but you know, at some point they're going to buy a house. Well, if they still have all this student debt, creditors, again, are going to turn them down, right? It's going to have long-lasting effects. Sir?
That's what I asked you about. The student debt is included in your average household debt of $70,000, or is that a separate number of itself?
I think that's a separate number. That is a separate number. Because that's student debt. If the parents are paying for the college, say, then it wouldn't be, I'm talking about the actual student that's borrowing money.
Of course, I'm saying there's a lot of, they never get rid of the student debt. They can't get rid of that. Not bankruptcy. Through bankruptcy. Nope.
No, but that's true. If you borrowed the money from a bank, that's a problem, if you can't meet it. At least with the government loans, they'll do some forbearance, they'll do some working with you on how much you can actually pay. So there are, you know, if a student's going to use that kind of debt, you know, the government loans are a little bit better to deal with. Getting debt free. Okay, so here's what you do to get debt free. There's another form on the Crown website. You list all of your creditors. So who it is, how much you owe, what percentage rate you owe, how much you're paying each month, you know, and when you think, based on that payment, when it'll be paid off. So you just get all this data in front of you, okay? Then you use the Debt Snowball, and I'll show you what that looks like. And remember I told you about that Christian credit counselors. This is what they do. They do this Debt Snowball, but they call it the Debt Snowball, Turbo Debt Snowball, because they've got lower interest rates negotiated with different creditors. So if a person is paying 17, 20, 30% on a card, they may have it for 8, for example. They're going to have it at a pre-negotiated rate with that creditor. So it's going to lower your interest rate, which is going to make you pay something off faster, and you're going to pay less each month. Then you plan your getting debt free, you know, major expenditures can throw you back into debt. So when I'm talking about planning major expenditures, like suppose you do want to buy a car. Well, do some research. You know, figure out what car you want, figure out how much you can pay, start saving for it. You know, if you're buying a new one, sometimes, you know, certain times of the year they offer, you know, lower rates on interest. They may be promoting something, you know. So to be smart about some of that, you want to become an educated consumer, and then when you see the right time, the right price, and you plan for it, that's when you do it. You know, and same thing as like what your wives do, probably if they do the grocery shopping. You know, that you can buy things that are non-perishable, and you wait for them to go on sale, and you stock up, right? So then when you just keep using it out of that inventory that you have, that's another way to save money. So another thing you can do is accelerate your house payment. You know, if you pay extra, you have a certain payment each month. If you pay extra, what you pay extra goes to your principal. So if you start making extra payments each month, that principal amount, it goes straight to the principal, means you're paying less interest and you're going to pay it off sooner. If you have flexible spending accounts where you work, you know, that's pre-taxes money that you can put away, and then you can spend it on medical. So, you know, if you have a lot of medical expenses in your family, or you just plan for what you normally have, use a flexible spending account to help you do that. You'll pay less taxes. If you're going to have students going to college, look for financial aid options. Another thing is to purchase long-term care insurance. So when you think about that later in life, you may want to buy that, because if you have it, then if you have to go into an assisted living or a nursing home and you start using it, that insurance is going to help you pay for it. So all the money you've saved up to live on isn't going to get eaten up by that assisted living or nursing home. Your long-term and care insurance will help pay that. Today's rates are $250 a day for these long-term care places. So it's something to think about. Again, I'm not telling you to do it, but just think about it, because it'll help keep costs down eventually. And then shorter term, it's, we just got through Christmas. It's March, it's almost April, but start thinking about saving for Christmas. Figure out, or start thinking about vacation. Start saving for vacation. Don't wait until it's time to go on vacation and then pull out the credit card. Say, okay, we're going to have a nice vacation. Let's just go on the credit cards, right? And then,
I'm sorry to interrupt. One of the things that I found from my brother's friend, anyhow, it doesn't matter where it came from. The point is that right after Christmas is where we have majority of our time where we're like, I just have spent so much money on it. You get yourself motivated and go on what's called a week plan. It's wherever the inverse of that week is. So there's 56 weeks in the year.
52.
52 weeks in the year. So that week, and the first week of the year, $52 goes in the savings bank. And it keeps on reducing until you're in the last week of the year, spending $1 into that savings account, and it goes towards Christmas. And that's
how much money is that, do you know?
Ends up being like over $1,500.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that people can do. I mean, that's a good thought. Thank you. And then the other thing, if getting out of debt is a major goal for this year, consider how that's going to impact your giving. Again, don't cut God off to get yourself out of debt. He honors, his math is unbelievable. So keep the giving up. Yes, sir.
Can I ask your advice on that? If you, assuming you've tightened your belt as much as you can, and you have debt paid off as a major goal, how do you balance between giving and paying down debt?
Okay.
How do you balance that?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you?
Interest rate where you say if you're paying more than X percent interest, then you need to put everything towards that.
Well, yeah. Okay. The question is, how do you, if you have debt and and you're giving, and the debt is I guess significant, maybe the way to say it. How do you balance that with your giving? So the first place where I go with that is, do you have a budget? Okay, so you have a budget, so that's good. Some people say that, but they don't have a budget, so it's hard to answer this question. But so if you have a budget and you know where your money's going, then the next thing is to look for two things. One is, again, things maybe you can sell that will help pay off that debt. Again, short term, it may mean that somebody has to get another job or another source of income. So there's really, you either have to spend less, make some extra money, or sell something to get more money, right? But working takes more of your time, and that can add stress. So I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm just saying these are things that you consider. At the end of the day, that's really what we teach tithing at Crown. That it's an issue between you and God, and He honors your heart. We know that debt is bondage. We know the oppression comes from that. If the stress of having all those creditors, or some of those creditors, the stress that's going to cause on the family, then maybe you want to you want to pay that bill. So I mean, again, it's not easy.
So I'm talking about the choice between giving 10% of your income and maybe not being able to pay down any extra towards debt, or giving only 5% of your income and putting 5% towards debt.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me show you the debt snowball a second, because maybe that'll help you. Because so the question is, what I heard is how fast you want to pay that down. Okay. So let's look at this briefly. This is an example, and I apologize for how small this is, but I'll tell you what's up. Like I mentioned, you have your creditor, what the balance is that you owe them, the interest rate, how many payments you're going to have, how much interest you're going to pay to get that thing paid off, and then the amount of payments left. Okay, so in looking in this example here, and I've got it right here. I know it's too small to see, but that last thing is which is a house payment, the mortgage. It's 191 payments before that'll be paid off, given this structure and what you're paying. So this one, in 2 months it'll be paid off. In 13 months this will be paid off. 55, 90, 88, 67, and 191 are the different time frames listed up there. So, and that's just paying the minimum payments at that interest rate. With the debt snowball, which is, let me make this bigger maybe. Down here, what it's showing, and again, I apologize, you can't read that, by adding $50 a month to what you're paying, okay? What happens is you end up from going from 191 payments to get everything paid off down to 75. So 6 years plus. The interest saved is $26,800. Okay, so what happens, what you do is, this one here says the principal balance is $190. The payment each month is $190. It's 19%. And so when you do the debt snowball, you start with the smallest amount and go to the biggest amount, not by interest rate. You go by smallest to largest. If you get the two numbers that are close relatively, then you go for interest rate. But
principal or the payment itself per month?
The total amount you owe.
Okay.
So you sort it that way. You take in this case, extra $50 a month. And then there's a calculator on the Crown website where you can plug this in and it'll show you. And it'll say if I want to put $10 a month or $50 or $100, it'll show you what's going to happen. So by adding some extra money, this first one, which would have been 2 payments away, now you get paid off in 1 month. And then what you do, okay, the first one, we're paying $190 a month, and I added $50, so I got $240, right? I paid that one off. Now I take that same $240 and I don't spend it on something else. I keep it right on this debt. So I take the extra $240. The next one on that list is $20 a month minimum payment. So I add the $240. Now I'm paying $260 towards that one. That one's going to get paid off the next month. So in 2 months, I've knocked off 2 credit cards, and if these are credit cards. Now I have a total of $260 extra dollars from those 2 that I'm not paying anymore. So I add it to the next one, which was $30. I'm paying $30, but I'm going to pay that off. That one goes down from 55 payments left to 5. So by adding, because I was only paying $30 a month, now I'm paying $290, right? Are you following this? Is this making sense? So it starts knocking these things off. And the other thing that we teach is when you knock one off, go celebrate a little bit. Now don't go to Ruth's Chris, just but maybe you rent a movie, maybe you do something fun, with your wife, if you're married, but celebrate, as you go through this. So, and then you just keep that up.
How does that math compare to tackling the debt based on highest interest rate first, as opposed to balance?
Well, it's not going to go that fast, for one thing, and it gets discouraging. So the biggest one on here was a mortgage, $142,000. So if you go after that one first, even with an extra $50 a month.
If the interest rate's the lowest, I'm talking about
interest rate.
Interest rate.
Doesn't matter. It's better to start with the smallest amount, and because you're going to get to that one pretty soon anyway.
I just don't want to admit the importance of paying your tithes.
Right.
Put that first in your heart, because where I used to make $70,000 a year, I make $20,000 a year now. And I am more financially stable now than I ever was before. The whole time I was working. Now I'm disabled now. Due to honoring God first with my tithes and offerings.
Mm-hmm.
He has made a way.
That's right.
All those other things. Car got paid off while I was out of work. 10 months of no paying the mortgage got paid off.
Wow.
While I was out, because with that little bit of disability check I had, I continued to pay my tithe during that time.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And God took care of all that debt because
Yeah.
I honored him, even though it looked, visually,
Right.
it looked horrible, but I still gave God his
Yeah.
first.
No, thank you for that.
And
Yeah.
If you look at the scriptures on tithing, it says honor the 10%, and you'll realize that back 100-fold. And it says, test me on this.
Right.
Nowhere in the Bible does it say
No.
test me, but it does under tithing. So if you believe that and you test, you'll get results.
Yeah, because that blessing comes back sometimes not in the way of money. It comes back in good health. It comes back into protection for your children. It comes back in ways where if he wasn't blessing you, you might get socked with some more debt. But let me keep. I got to be done by quarter after, and I'm close. So, but hold your question a minute if you would. Here's something to consider. Eliminating debt may be the most difficult, but the most liberating of all financial decisions you'll ever make. And it's essential to overcoming this financial bondage. You've got to get out of debt. I just want to emphasize that. Don't get mad at me, but you got to do that.
Tell our government that.
Yeah, we got to get rid of that too, right?
Well,
we're the ones paying
That's where
it.
it all starts is right there. They're teaching us all a bad lesson out of carrying.
Well, I know, and people will picking up on it. Yep.
It's just it's American way.
So here's savings statistics. Percentage of Americans who have no savings at all is 25%. Personal savings in the United States decreased to 4.2% in November from 4.5%. And that's probably understandable because Christmas was coming up, Thanksgiving, people spend more at the end of the year, gifts, things like that. But that's not high enough. I'm going to show you what you ought to be thinking about in terms of saving. And it's essential to achievement of financial freedom because financial freedom does mean having enough money to live in this lifestyle that you're used to. So it doesn't mean being Warren Buffett, like I've said, doesn't mean having a lot of money. It just means having enough money that you can have a lifestyle that you were content with when you were working, God's providing. That's where it's at. So, so you want to be saving for future needs. You want to make this a priority to save a portion. And so here's the guidelines. You ready? 25%. You should be saving at least 10% for things that you're going to be buying. You remember like major expenditures? You want to be planning for those. Cars in the future, you want to be saving. You don't want to be borrowing money to buy a car. Once you pay your car off in your budget, keep the budgeted amount for the car and put it in an account. Don't think, oh, I paid the car off, now I can spend all that extra money on something else. Because someday, guess what? You're going to need another car. So put that money in savings, pay yourself, and then when it comes time to buy another car, you trade the one. What we do with all our cars, I told you we buy used cars. I go to Craigslist, my wife does. She goes to Craigslist, she puts our car in there, we sell it outright to somebody else. I show them all my records, I tell them everything I know about the car. I just want to be totally honest with them. We tell them what's about the car. They buy it for a certain amount. We take that amount, money we've saved, and we pay cash for the next car. You'll never have another car payment to someone else. You're going to be paying yourself. You're not going to be paying any interest. As a matter of fact, you're going to be making interest while you save, although it's 0 point nothing right now. But at least you're saving something. If your budget has to have savings, if your employee matches contributions to a 401k, max it out. Because remember, we're talking 25%. If they're going to give you 5 or 6, there's 6 of the 25. So you just need to make up the other part, right? So. And then become a savvy consumer. Again, be wise, wait for things to go on sale, check around, make sure you know what you're doing, and then when it comes time to buy it, buy it. So here's some interesting facts about investing. So now we're going to talk about what you do with this savings. There's a rule of 72 and the magic of compounding. Rule 72 says how long, it's a guideline to tell you how long it will take to double your money. So if you can make 3% a year, you divide 3 into 72, and you get 24. So if you only got 3% a year, and you compounded it. So if you had $100, you got $3 the first year. Now you're going to get 3% on 103, right? And then you just keep letting it go. It will take 24 years to get to be $200. So that's a long time. The other half of that is true. You hear about inflation. So if inflation's running 3% a year, it's like compounding. In 24 years, the price of things are going to be twice what they are today. Some things will be more because some things inflate faster, some things deflate a little bit. But in general, you can use that number. So if you can make 6% a year, double the 3 to 6, it'll take 12 years to double, right? It'll have that time. If you can get 12% a year, it's going to take 6 years to double your money. So that's the way you think about it. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to apply that here in another couple slides, but that's what you use to figure that out. The magic of compounding, somebody called this the 8th wonder of the world. You know, if you have, like if you do dividend and reinvesting, if you own stocks and you have the dividends reinvested in buy more stock every time the dividend's paid, that's compounding, right? And it'll grow over time. So the key here is amount of time, the interest rate you're getting, and the amount of money. And that'll determine your how much it's going to compound. And here, I'm not going to show you this, but I'll tell you, I have an example of 2 people. One person at age 21 put $1,000 a year away for 8 years until they were 29. So they put $8,000 in, and I'm going to use 10% interest or 10% yield. And if you look at the stock market since like 1929, it's about 10%, okay? But you know, we're seeing a lot of this right now, but over time, it's been returning around 10%, so I'm going to use that number. So they put away $8,000, got 10% a year. The second person waited until that person stopped investing $1,000 a year. So at age 29, they put $1,000 a year, and they invested till they were 65. So they put in $37,000. The other person only put in $8,000. The first person that only put in $8,000 at 10% had $427,000. The other person that invested $37,000 only had $363,000. So again, it's how soon you start. So if you're young, put money in the bank every month. If you put $100 a month in the bank, starting now, when you're 65, you know, it will have grown for you. So, so investing your surplus. So you know, learn about the markets. This is not a Crown resource. It's a Christian organization. It's called Sound Mind Investing. If you're not, you know, familiar with stocks, bonds, different ways to invest, mutual funds, CDs, yada, 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 this book is a great resource. There's soundmindinvesting.com. Yeah, you can learn a lot. It'll help you learn what all these things mean and how they work, and you're going to need to know that. Right? Because if you leave the money in the savings account, it's just not going to get there for you. So you want to invest, you want to establish an investing mindset. So again, what does that mean? That means discipline to invest on a regular basis. It means understanding your risk tolerance. You know, what can you sleep with at night? You're going to put it in something so volatile or risky that you can't sleep at night because you're afraid you're going to lose it all. Or you can put it in something so safe that it's not going to get you anywhere. I mean, you got to figure yourself out and what you can deal with. And you may want to consider seeking professional advice. Before you get a financial planner, go on the website. You know, you can get resources that'll tell you, like, here's the questions you ought to be asking someone, you know, to consider. So don't just, you know, because your neighbor's using Joe or Mary, you know, doesn't mean you need to. Go do some research. And then one common goal is to have enough to live on in retirement, right? So let's talk about retirement a minute, which is not a biblical term, by the way, but I don't have time to get into that right now. But 40% of Americans say they're not saving for retirement at all. These are statistics from 2012 timeframe. These aren't real old. Percentage of people at 35 to 54 who believe they won't have enough money put away for retirement is 80% of people. And there's 35% of people in America that live totally on Social Security. Well, what I wanted you to take away, what I had written down, was live a life of biblical stewardship, effectively manage what God's given you and provided, get out of debt and stay out of debt, and then begin saving and never stop. So, well, thank you very much for coming.
I trust this message has provided practical encouragement to you in your journey with Christ. Please visit noblewarriors.org to learn more about how Noble Warriors works to help churches reach and build men. God bless you, friend.